And so we're going to kind of look at a mishmash of different aspects of this particular section, this up to this first turning point here going into chapter 15. But somebody summarized for us what occurs the night of Passover, what occurs up to the Red Sea and crossing. Just give me a 4,000-foot summary of sort of the chronological actions that take place going forward here. Summarize the Exodus narrative post Pharaoh saying go.
They left, firstborns were killed the next day or the next following days. The Israelites leave or pack up and leave, and Pharaoh gets mad, follows them with the armies, and then they get to the Red Sea, and now they're mad at Moses because they're stuck. And then Moses prays again, and the Red Sea parts, and people go through, and Pharaoh says, well, if they can, I can, and follows trying to kill the Israelites, and sure enough, God says,
Yeah.
and Pharaoh dies.
Yeah.
The armies are
Yeah.
killed.
Yeah,
Is
perfect.
that 4,000 enough?
Yeah, that was perfect. That's absolutely right. Yes, ma'am.
One thing I had read over, and not paid attention to before, is where Pharaoh says, leave, get out, do whatever. Then he says, but bless me. Really talks about when he says, but bless me too.
Do you know what passage that's in?
Yes, that's going to be chapter 12, verse 32. Now, I'm in the Jewish study Bible.
Yeah.
It says, take both your flocks and your herds, as you said, and get out of here, but bless me too.
Yeah, it says that's King James.
Yep, that's what it says in the ESV as well. What are your thoughts about that?
I think he knew that they had an awesome God at this point.
I think at this point he's grieving for his loss of his son. I think he's probably bewildered by what all has happened, and all the gods he believed in have let him down. His faith has been shattered, and this God of the Jews has shown himself to be superior to him and his God, and I think he's bewildered.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't.
He gets over it and he starts chasing after him.
Yeah, what do you think about that juxtaposition? You have a man who's been hardened previous to this. Here it feels like he's broken, maybe, and also desperate in a way. Bless me. Those words are confusing.
Maybe he's sincere, like bless me, or maybe it's like, okay, you've done everything to me to take everything away from me and shatter everything. Bless me. It's almost like a command.
Like bless me by leaving.
Whatever.
Yeah.
So I just completely read over those 4 words right there.
Yeah, honestly, I have too. Yeah, it's hitting me as you're telling me. So yeah, that bless me. It's interesting. I have to think about that.
The
Yeah.
loss of his son, that would probably have broken him if it didn't. But then,
But revenge takes over the hatred, and I'm going to get you.
Yeah, you kind of get echoes of Cain here, where his humanity starts to show through in his because it's almost humility by saying bless me. So it's almost like he's finally humbled himself, softened a little bit, but then he doesn't control the beast, and that beast starts to take over, and the beast wants blood, and then the beast takes blood. It's just not in the form that Pharaoh would want, unfortunately, and not through the method that the beast would want. So, yeah.
well, they had people chirping at him too,
Yeah.
telling him.
Yep.
So Adam, did they do the Passover before they left Egypt, or
Mhm.
they
Yes.
did? So
Yeah, they did it the night before. So, well, they did the Passover in the slaughtering of the lamb and the eating like it was instructed, but then but not in the ceremonial future way. Like that was explained, but they only did a major portion of it. Then the ceremonial way will be done every year after this, in a retelling of what God did.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we see is, let's talk about this. Where did this incredible water rescue take place?
Sea of Sur.
Hmm?
Near the Sea of Sur, if you are.
Sea of Sur, okay.
I'm sitting with my Bible, I'm used to do it, spitting
The
my
Red Sea, they read.
Red Sea.
Yeah, so
Where
the
on the Red Sea?
the Red Sea, the problem with the Red Sea translation is that that's not what the words are. The word in Hebrew is Yam Suf, which is probably where they kind of got that sea of Sur. Is that what you said? Yam Suf is literally translated as just the Sea of Reeds. Problem with the Sea of Reeds is, where's that? And we don't know as far as that goes. We have some guesses. This is from the ESV Study Bible, a map from the ESV Study Bible, and it has plenty of little dotted lines about where they think could have happened. If you look at the Red Sea translation, the Red Sea translations came about probably through the Septuagint translation, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, where they inserted a place name, basically, for the Sea of Reeds. I think it's not that big of a deal to call it the Red Sea, but I think that it misses the literary point in that we are bookending this section. How are we bookending this section by calling this the rescue through the Sea of Reeds? Right. So the opening of the book was another water rescue in the reeds of the Nile. And so this is like an auditory way for the writer to close this chapter. We have the two rescues through the seas. So I think literarily the Sea of Reeds helps define this closing point. And what we'll see, if you recall all the way back to our Genesis Noah narrative, 1 through 10, there would be random times where the author would break into poem or song. And do you remember by chance what the point of him breaking into poem or song at that moment might be? I'm really testing you now. This is a very small point that probably was most likely missed. It is another transition point. And so as you're reading any narrative and you notice that in the middle of a narrative it switches into a poem or a song, generally speaking, it's like a closing of this chapter moving to the next chapter. It was a good way for them to like end the service like what we do and opening the service like we do in our own worship way. Between the songs kind of thing. And so in the narrative books, anytime you see that, that generally is going to be a confirmation of a switch. This also will take place in the Exodus narrative because immediately following the Exodus narrative through the Sea of Reeds, what is transposed down in Exodus chapter 15? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Moses and Miriam's song, right, of rescue, of deliverance. And so from that point forward, we're entering a whole new section. So I think that's just a little, like I said, most of this is going to be kind of mixed together or all over the place. Now we have an issue that we have to account for in chapter 12, verse 37. Actually, somebody read verses 35 through 37 for me. Of chapter 12. Chapter 12, verses 35 through 37.
And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. And the children of Israel journeyed from Rameses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men beside children. And a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle.
No, that's good. Okay, so I know. Well, I respect her a lot more. What stood out in that?
It says they borrowed.
Yeah, anybody else have a different translation there? I like plundered. Yeah, they plundered. Okay.
Yeah.
So that stands out.
They asked the Egyptians.
Mm-hmm.
So that they let them have their
So this is
request.
my theory. I think they asked the Egyptians, like, take whatever you want, just get out of it.
That might be true. Yeah.
That God made the Egyptians, it made it favorable to them to give it to them.
It's true.
Like, bless me and go.
Is this the first time we've heard that same narrative take place?
Joseph.
Do you recall the original times that Pharaoh would release someone and bless them with much? So Joseph, yes, but that's not the original. So pre-Joseph.
Got rid of Abraham? I mean, not got rid of Abraham. but-
Yes, yeah. So recount that story. Do you remember?
Yeah, and he had plagues too,
Yeah. Why?
because
His
he took
wife.
Sarah.
Yeah, he pretended his wife was a sister.
He didn't want God to come down on him.
Do what?
He didn't want God to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And the plagues afflicted Pharaoh. He tells him to get out of here and blesses him with a whole bunch of stuff. It's a very interesting story. Little tiny side note there. We see the same thing happen with Joseph in a way, but the difference, the inversion of the Joseph story is instead of going, he stays and brings everyone else. And so now we have a whole nation in the wrong land, wrong people, wrong house. And here we're seeing the plagues again, and we're seeing what happened in the micro picture, happened in the big picture. And now God is setting his sights on his people, and his people are being birthed into a new nation. And in doing so, they are going to be given riches and all this stuff to get out. But there's one little extra detail thrown in there as well, two details, but one little extra detail in there. How do they describe the crowds that are going?
600,000.
Okay, so set that aside for just a moment, because that's the second detail. What's the other descriptive term?
Besides children.
A mixed multitude. What does that mean?
Probably had Egyptians.
Egyptians included.
Correct.
Where do you see that?
Correct.
38, verse 38.
And so what we see is the Israelites, along with any Egyptian who's like, you know what, I'm on board with that God. We're allowed to head out with them in a mixed multitude, along with these riches and all that.
Do you think the slaves got to go also, like the ones that were not Israelites?
Well, in the past,
I mean-
there were
You know, 'cause
restrictions.
you know they had
against
slaves from other
slave
places.
Specificity.
I'm certain. I'm certain that. I'm filling in blanks here, but I'm certain that slaves owned by the Egyptians who were going probably were headed with them, but I couldn't tell you. So what I want to show you though is that it's a mixed multitude. Like God's grace is given to any and all who decide to listen to the word of the Lord and call on the name of Yahweh. But let's go back to that 600,000 number. We have a major problem with that 600,000 number because, as you described, that's not everyone either. That's just the men.
Way too big of a number.
Mm-hmm.
Is it like hyperbole?
Well, so, and that doesn't include the multitude, how did you say it? The many, also the many, the many herds of cattle or something. How did that say it?
Even very much.
Very much. Large droves of cattle. So, conservatively, if you were to average out the amount of people who are leaving, going off the 600,000 number, you're looking at upwards of over 2 million to 2.5 million people, not including the herds.
The food that has to feed those 2.
The square footage of a camp that size would be 400 square miles of just to camp them. And there is zero archaeological evidence for that. It also does not fit on the Canaan side. So post-wandering in the desert, there's no way that even close to that amount of people came into the Promised Land from Israel. It just doesn't work. So what we have to do now is figure out what do we do with that. Since we're good, studious students of the Bible, and we trust this, and we believe it, we have to figure out what to do with that. The first thing you have to understand is that Hebrew numbers do not work the same way as English numbers. When it says 600,000, that is an English interpretation, English explanation for numbers. But they spell out all of their numbers. So if it were 600,000, they would say 6 and 100,000, basically, kind of thing, is what it would say. Or 6 and 110, kind of thing. And so the interpretation is that it would equal around 600,000. So we have a couple of making sense of the numbers. These are a couple theories that have been laid out. And I'm going to tell you that I don't know what the correct answer is. I think there's some reasonableness between one or a couple of these, but I don't know. Ancient Egyptologists and archaeologists are the ones who make the claim that there is zero evidence for that massive amount of groups of people to exit out of Egypt and to camp anywhere and to move. In fact, somebody did the math. To get 2.5 million people to travel through from one spot to another, if you were to mark right in the middle of the Red Sea or the Sea of Reeds, to get all 2.5 million people there, you'd have to have lines of, what was it? It was lines of, where did I write it down? 1,000 people across. Yeah, that's what it was. Lines of 1,000 people across. And it would take them 20 hours for every line to cross one single point in the middle of the Red Sea. 1,000 people across, and it would take them 20 hours. And that does not include any aspect of animals, and really does not account for anybody who's ever traveled with children. Yeah. The numbers they just get very tricky. So the first conclusion you can come to is, hey, archaeologists, Egyptologists, they're wrong. There's no physical accounts at all of the Israelites leaving, and of course there isn't. Because if you go to Egypt right now and you look in their massive monuments and you look at the beautiful hieroglyphic paintings all across the walls of the historical figures and the rulers of their town, you know what they're talking about, those rulers? All of those rulers' victories. You know what they're not talking about? 2.5 million slaves leaving, the crumbling of an entire economy, the death of the Pharaoh and all of his army. Of course they're not talking about that. That just shows weakness, right? So there's some reasonability to going, okay, well, yeah, it doesn't tell the whole story. You're looking at a political, what's that called whenever the governments try to sway the story to make you... Propaganda. You're looking at ancient propaganda, right? Of course you're not going to find this massive... yeah, exactly. Right? So that's one potential. Another potential here is one scholar, Ronald Allen, who's kind of the guy here with regards to ancient Egyptology and how that works with the Exodus narrative and ancient Israel. He says the numbers are rhetorical or symbolic. In other words, they may be used as multiples of tens to make this whole situation fit a little more round number, exact number. And it's like if I were to say there was a massive fire downtown and there were like 1,000 firefighters there. Nobody in this room would ever believe there's 1,000 firefighters there, right? You're just going to be like, there was a massive amount of firefighters there by me saying there was 1,000 firefighters there. The idea is that anyone and everyone, mixed multitude, they all got to go, and this was like 600,000 people wandering. Okay? This also accounts for the round numbers and fits with the exact numbers of firstborns in relation to the Levites. Anybody have any idea what that's talking about? Yeah, most don't read over the censuses of the Levites. But if you go and pay attention and count up the firstborns to the Levites, they equaled up 22,000. This would be closer to 250,000 total, and would average out to 60,000 men, which would be the whole symbolic times 10. So 60,000 men in the census that the Levites will take in the wilderness, and it would come closer to the 60,000 point. So if you now took 60,000 and multiplied it times 10, 600,000, right? And so the idea is like, okay, it's still a massive amount of people, but 60,000 is way more doable than 600,000. Another issue you have with the numbers is the fact that Abraham, when it is being prophesied that his generations will spend a certain amount of time in Egypt, what you see is the sons of Jacob being 12. From 12 families, they're going to grow in 4 generations to 600,000 people. That is a lot of making and having babies. Now, that does speak pretty clearly about the whole midwife drama. They're fervent and have children before we can get there, and they were fruitful and multiplied in Egypt in chapter 1 of Exodus. So there's it could kind of work there. But 60,000, they're still having a lot of babies pretty quick in 4 generations out of 12 people, 12 families. Another version of the rhetorical or symbolic is that the numbers represent the population during a later period. So this whole 2.5 million, 2 million population is actually a little more real in David and Solomon's time in the kingdom. And so they may be using this symbolically, like, hey, it's like basically all of us. You know, population of Nederland was 18,000. It's like, oh, and 18,000 people went, and all of us can go, oh, basically all of Nederland went, you know. So it may be symbolic in that way. It's okay with that. I have a tendency to lead towards number 3. The phrase here is actually mistranslated and should read 600, for lack of better terms, military units. Where we get this is in chapter 12, verse 37. The Hebrew doesn't use numerals, but instead again spells out the numbers in full. So 600 is the 100 there is Aleph, on foot, men without children. The word Aleph has 4 potential meanings in Hebrew. And this is all taken from the Bible Project's classroom by a scholar named Carmen Imes. She's brilliant, so you should look her up sometime. Aleph means 1, either 1,000. 2, it could mean head of cattle, so 600 head of cattle. 3, it's also used in as a military unit. Ancient people who figure out numbers basically said a military unit, kind of like in Jesus' time when they would use the legion. Roman legion can be averaged out to a certain amount of men. I think it's 70, something like that, or 700. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. But same thing with the military unit. The military units here averaged between 9 or 6 and 10, or 6 and 20 people, I think is what it said. 6 and 20 men. And so, it's also used as a clan. So in Judges 6:15, but sir, how can I deliver Israel? My Aleph is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. So the Aleph is used as a clan or a little tribe of Manasseh. Same in Joshua 22. And with him 10 chiefs, one from each of the tribal families of Israel, every one of them the head of a family among the Aleph of Israel, among all the different clans or tribes of Israel. So if you looked at that, out of all of those potentials, I think it fits most of the numbers fit better if you're looking at it like a military unit. So between 6 and 10 of them, and there's 600 of those little groups of 6 and 10 people, little tribes or even clans, if you want to call it that way. And so that's where you get closer to the 60,000 number as far as that goes. This is a whole lot of mumbo jumbo. All I'm saying is that there are people in this world that will jump on that. And they're usually the people who want to prove everything about God's existence in the Bible wrong. And so for a Christian, we ought to be prepared with at least saying, look, I don't know what the answer is, but here's some potentials. And I think that that's really important. It's easy to read over a number, 600,000. But if you slow down, suddenly you're like, oh, that is a lot of people. I don't know that works. Okay, any questions about that?
Does the number 430 mean anything specific? Because that's how long they were in Egypt.
Yes. Yes, it does. Mm-hmm.
Y'all talk about it Tuesday?
No, we have not talked about that, and I don't recall off the top of my head, but Google it and let me know. Because we have talked about it. Actually, so the 430 years, that's what you're talking about with the how long they were in Egypt. That's the whole generations situation. Yeah, there's multiple meanings behind that, and for the life of me, I cannot remember. They actually spent 38 years in the wilderness, not 40 in a way, but there's a way to account for that. It could be that they spent 2 years in between mountains, like from mountain to mountain, in 38 years. But the 38 years is going to be important because when we go to John, we're going to read of a paralytic who has been paralyzed for 38 years.
Then Jesus was tempted for 40 days.
Mm-hmm.
40 days.
So you got both those numbers. They're both going to work in similar ways. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, Georgia has 600,000 people. No, 6 million, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong numbers. My bad.
Maybe 100 years ago.
Yeah, really.
If anybody's ever been to the Atlanta airport, that's how many it has.
That's very
So I have one more thing that I wanted to just kind of show out there. This is super random, and then we'll kind of close out here. But there are multiple levels of things that are happening in this narrative. One of the things that we talked about several weeks ago is the sneaky way that the snake, the serpent, the Nachash, keeps rearing its ugly head randomly in this book. Do you guys happen to remember one of the times that took place? The Nachash, the snake, the serpent.
Isn't that what we called Egypt?
Hmm?
Wasn't that what Egypt was referred to?
Well,
The Pharaoh.
that's later. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So yes, but specifically in this Exodus narrative, we have dealt with a serpent.
When God told him to throw his rod.
Right. So first sign Moses is to do to convince that Pharaoh needs to listen up is take the rod. While out in the wilderness, he throws it down. It turns into a Nachash, a snake, a serpent. Freaks Moses out, as it should have, right? That's the first little hint here. The Nachash just reared its ugly little head here. But who's controlling that Nachash?
God.
Yeah, God. And he's using Moses to do it, right? The next time we see the serpent is in the same act, except there's a variation. When he goes before Pharaoh, he throws the thing down. And anybody happen to remember what it turned into there? In the English language, it's still a snake.
Tanin.
The tanin. And where have we heard the tanin? Yes.
The what?
Yes.
Leviathan.
We talked about it in Jonah. Yes, creation, right? When he created the great sea creatures, right? And then in Job, like the Leviathan, tanin, it's the God creates these massive things that are deadly, and these are the things that frolic and play in his oceans like little children, basically. So in two different passages, we see the tanin and the Nachash jump out, and both of these are both languages used in the surrounding cultures, mythos, for these great chaos dragons, these great chaos beasts of the wilderness and of the oceans. The tanin specifically in the ocean, the Nachash specifically usually in the wilderness. And here we're seeing that God is the one who's in control. Except there's also one little extra part. The serpents still show up. There's another version or another serpent that shows up at the same time as that sign act. Where does the next serpents come from? Who is standing there challenging all the miracles that?
All the wizards.
Yeah, it says very strangely that they were able to replicate this
What's that all about?
through the powers of their dark magic, their dark ways. And you go, huh?
Yeah.
They were able to do that? What was the response, of course, hilariously? The tanin did what? Ate their little snakes, right? So here we got like little serpent seedlings, the seed of the serpents that are out here, and somehow these magicians are able to replicate that, but God just sends his own Nachash, and at the hand of God, God is able to use the power of his own tanin, his own serpent, to eat up the serpents produced by men. This seems like, why do we need to know that? Right? Why do we need to know that? Except that it's going to be imagery used all throughout the rest of the Bible to describe what is occurring to Israel in their historicity during that time. So, for instance, when they are taken up in Babylon, the writers of the Bible will say that they are swallowed up in the belly of the beast. Turn with me to Isaiah chapter 51, and we'll kind of end with this. Isaiah 51. We haven't done this in a while, but if you use Step Bible, you can always look at the little summary up there in the little corner here, which of course is not going to work. That's okay. This is a pretty popular passage from Isaiah, probably written. Anybody? Well, do you know where it was written? Oh yeah.
I have the summary.
Yeah, go ahead and read it. Read the summary out loud for us.
God will richly bless the Israelites and punish their oppressors. Listen, the Lord will comfort Zion. Awake, O arm of the Lord. The ransom shall retire, and he will drink the cup of my wrath no more.
Okay. So Isaiah 51, we're just going to read a little bit of this. But the words of Isaiah in the midst of Babylon, listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, you who seek the Lord. Look to the rock from which you were hewn, and the quarry from which you were dug. Look to Abraham your father, and to Sarah who bore you. For he was but one, and I called him, that I might bless him and multiply him. For the Lord comforts Zion. What's Zion? Somebody? Yeah, ultimately. And comforts all her waste places. I just thought about this. I don't think we talked about this very much, but the city was the thing that Cain went and built. That is the ear, which was his own version of the Etzer, and the Etzer in God's ways was woman for man. So every time you see an ear, it is represented as an Etzer in female form. So Lady Zion, the cities are always female forms because it's man's version of their Etzer, their helper. I know.
Like
that
boats
was,
have women's names.
huh?
Boats, like they.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Boats have
Yeah, something similar to that, yeah. So, there you go. I don't know why I had to tell you that. I just thought that, I always think those little things are fun. It comforts all her waste places and makes her wilderness like Eden, her desert like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and the voice of a song. Give attention to me, my people, and give ear to me, my nation. For law will go out from me, and I will set my justice for a light to the peoples. I'm getting somewhere, I promise. My righteousness draws near, my salvation has gone out. My arms will judge the people. The coastland hopes for me, and my arms they wait. Lift up your eyes to the heavens. Look at the earth beneath. For the heavens vanish like smoke. The earth will wear out like a garment, and they who dwell in it will die in like manner. But my salvation will be forever. Now think about, which we didn't talk about, but Moses' words to the Israelites. Behold, sit and wait. The salvation of the Lord has come. Right? Here the salvation will be forever, and my righteousness will never be dismayed. Listen to me, you who know righteousness, the people in whose heart is my law. Fear not the reproach of man, nor be dismayed at their revilings. For the moth will eat them up like a garment, and the worm will eat them like wool. But my righteousness will be forever, and my salvation to all generations. Now pay attention here. Awake, awake, put on strength, O arm of Lord, arm of the Lord. Okay, so what's happening here? What's the subject? What is this supposed to do? Who's supposed to wake? What's supposed to wake? The arm of the Lord is supposed to apparently wake and put on a garment. Okay? Awake as in the days of old, the generations of long ago. He's looking back at a certain time. Was it not you who cut Rahab in pieces? Anybody have a different version there? This is ESV. Verse 9.
Cut Rahab and wounded the dragon.
Okay, so, huh?
I got a sea monster.
Yeah, for which one? For the dragon or the sea monster? Or for Rahab or for the dragon?
Right after that. Right, Rahab.
Okay, so we have Rahab, in pieces and who pierced the dragon. Now, poetic structure, generally it will build something and then it'll strengthen it in the next line. That's why you see the little indentation right here. And so who is the dragon being paralleled with in the previous line? Rahab. Now, this is a great example of how quickly our brains massively, incredibly work. You hear Rahab, you associate with who?
The harlot.
Yeah, the harlot, right? But that is not at all who is being spoken about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
She wasn't cutting you, she was saved.
So,
Who's this Rahab?
so who is this?
Slave.
So who is this Rahav? If you look up Rahav, it means
Mythical sea monster.
a monster, a mythical sea monster, Rahab. It is a mythical sea monster, literally a storm arrogance. It means terror. If you look up ancient mythology and Rahab, you should do that.
Monster symbolizes Pharaoh.
But not Rahab with the red string.
This is Rahab.
Get that out of your head, apparently.
Well, don't get that out of your head, because what you need to do is see how this would have been seen in an ancient Israelite and ancient Babylonian, and then see how God is using a woman with the same name. Because oftentimes those names are meant to be tied together, and are meant to be inverted, and helps you see. I mean, it's just layer after layer you can go down. Rahab. Was it not you who cut Rahab in pieces and who pierced the dragon? When are we talking about? He's looking in the days of old, recall? Well, let's find out. Was it not you who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, who made the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to pass over? The great sea passing. Yeah, so this is the Exodus narrative. And the ransomed of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing everlasting joy upon their heads, and they shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. I am he who comforts you. If you're in my Bible study in the morning, there's Nacham, which is the repentance word. Who are you that you are afraid of man who dies, of the Son of Man who is made like grass, who has forgotten the Lord, your Maker, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundation of the earth? Okay, so somehow in the midst of using this language of the whole Exodus thing, it's saying that something else took place. What is it saying it took place? Apparently he cut Rahab into pieces and pierced the dragon. It's an interesting thought. It's an interesting thought process to go down and try to figure out what these biblical authors are trying to show us, right? Because in the same instance that you're reading the surface level story of God performing this miraculous event, there seemingly also seems to be other stories being told, and it's all represented in little tiny passages that you don't realize are that fascinating until you start to tie all these things together. Because what we saw was that Moses throws a serpent on the ground, and the Nakash became a vehicle through which God would bring justice and proof of his existence. The beast would listen to God's voice. And then on the other side of that, you're going to see what happens when man begins to not control the beast and lets the beast control him. And that's where you get Pharaoh, that's where you get Nebuchadnezzar, that's where you get Babylon, that's where you get the Antichrist figure of Revelation and Daniel. And that's where you get what happens when instead of ruling the beast rules the world. Well, we already know what happens, because the thing that's been consistent from the very start is that thing is at the will of God no matter what. And what seems like it's in control is actually still God's sovereign power and work in his creation. And so the biblical writers who understand this very well can write things like, oh, you shattered the heads of the serpent in the water. The Tannin are gone. You destroyed them. But also somehow be referring back to a physical historical event that took place with a man that represented that beast that we are fighting still today. Right? So you can kill a beast in a human form, but that beast that we're afraid of, that still rules this world, doesn't actually rule. The power has never belonged to them. He's still at the will of the Father and of the Creator.
Just causing chaos.
Yeah, ultimately. And that can look through human form in our own flesh, and it can also look through the movements of that chaos dragon itself. Yeah. All right, any questions, thoughts? Yeah, I know, right?
This
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
That's what you're worried about? I'm still figuring out where Rahab is.
Okay, all right. Go, look at the Rahab thing, right? The Rahab thing means terror, the night. It is this awful creature in ancient mythology in multiple surrounding ancient Mesopotamian cultures. You should look it up. It's actually really interesting, and becomes very interesting if you really think it could have actually been an actual existent thing and may still be. But Rahab is famous for two things. One was her profession, which was she's a prostitute, and then what did she do?
She saved the spies.
How?
She hid them from the people who were searching to kill them.
Mm-hmm. And what was in return her response?
She said to remember me when you come in.
And what did they do?
They remembered her.
How?
They saved her and her family.
How?
They took her out.
And why did they put a red thread? Where did they put a red thread?
Out the window.
Out of her window, right? And an opening of the door. And suddenly what you see is on the inside of that door, as long as that red thread is over that door, you've got the Passover language. You see the language that's taking place. And suddenly the thing that would be of terror actually becomes the vehicle through which the salvation of the spies will occur. Like themes, like those patterns fit. It's just like you just got to catch on to when those writers are hinting it at you. And then you got to spend some time, in the words of Tim Mackey, like that's when you get a cup of coffee or tea and you just go walk around and just think about it for a while. Because suddenly all this stuff will start to pop in your head and it's really cool.
When I was reading through this, it kept repeating over and over again how the firstborn is going to be, God claims the firstborn as a consecration or sacrifice to him. It belongs to me.
Yes.
And over and over again, it repeats it. Then all of a sudden it throws in the firstborn male. It's like an afterthought. It says the firstborn, then the firstborn male.
Interesting.
That was interesting.
Yep. Yes.
My study Bible, it mentions a Ugaritic literature. and it says
Ugaritic.
Rahab was the name of a sea monster, and then it says this could refer to the hippopotamus, an animal that when it sits in the water of the Nile doing nothing. Rahab became a poetic synonym for Egypt. The image emphasizes the fact that the Egyptians' help was worthless.
Yeah. No.
What is that off of? I don't remember.
He doesn't believe it's a hippo.
No. It's not a hippo. If you want to see a hippo, there ain't nothing terror about a hippo. I mean, if you get bit by one, it's terrifying, but
Now in Africa, they are dangerous.
But the hippo line goes into Job when it talks about behemoth and stuff like that. That's where you get the whole, well, maybe it was a hippo, maybe it was a dinosaur, maybe it was a rhinoceros, maybe it wasn't any of those things. Maybe it was a representative of chaos and destruction and death and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And where did you read that, Lee?
It's in the David Jeremiah study Bible, in a footnote.
What I would encourage,
Chapter 30, verse 7 in Isaiah.
if you can get your hands on a book that's called, it's a resource called the Dictionary of Deities and Demons, it is really enlightening. Suddenly all these names that you'll read, like Lilith, which is portrayed in Isaiah as the night owl, and for some reason the interpretation is as a night owl. But it is the word Lilith, which has a whole mythological backstory that is very strange and very creepy and very weird. But it just goes to show you that there's multiple things that are happening, especially in those surrounding cultures. And so the DDD, the Dictionary of Deities and Demons, is a great deities and demons. Yep, it just is like a whole conglomeration of ancient writing of every named deity and demon that had in any writing in those cultures. So. Yeah, stay away from Stitchin. Get away from Stitchin. He's crazy. Okay, somebody closes in prayer, and then we can talk afterwards if you want to.
Father God, thank you for this time we can study more about you and learn more about you. Lord, I pray that you just help us to take what we've learned and apply it to our lives. And Father, we want to learn more about you because of what we've already learned. And thank you for Adam. Thank you for the opportunity to come and study with him. And Father, thank you for the time that he puts in. Bless him for that. Father, I pray that you go with us through this week. Help us to be a lighthouse for you in all that we do. In your name we pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Adam.